the Yom Hilulah, the death anniversary. I don't want to use really the death anniversary because that might almost contradict everything I want to say tonight. So I would rather like to refer it as Yom Hilulah. Yom Hilulah is one of praise, also a joyous evening, because Moses left the observable world today. Left the observable world today. We'll elaborate on that particular idea shortly. One of the early lessons that I received when I first entered the world of Kabbalah was that my teacher told me that when you notice an aspect that is encompassed within the Judaic influence, know that the ones that there is the least attention attached to it, know that that is probably the most significant amongst the few significant, important events that take place each and every single year. One of those events that I subsequently learned was this event that we are all gathered here as they have been gathered in Israel, in Paris, London. That we are celebrating this event known as the day that Moses left this world, Zayin, Adar, the seventh day of Adar. And yet, for those of you who may have had their only experience back to their roots in Judaism and have found these roots at the center, may be totally unaware of the fact that this is not a common event in the mainstream of Judaism. Many, and I've encountered many of our friends who have entered these doors and have assumed that what we do here probably takes place all wherever there may be a synagogue or a temple. And unfortunately, this particular event is no longer celebrated anywhere in the world other than in the centers. And therefore, there must be some special significance. And when we say special significance, we're only referring to one and one aspect alone. And you know what that is. Where can I tap and where can I connect with some energy that can sustain me to go through each and every single day, month, year, etc. And that event of connecting with Moses, whatever he represented, and we shall discuss in detail just what it is that we seek here this evening. Making a connection to Moses' soul is certainly an admirable occasion, an admirable event, even significant, that somehow we can connect with the great teacher. But is that all? Is that all that we hope to achieve by coming together all around the world for the specific purpose of connecting with Moses? Hello? Yes. I guess one day with a little more sophistication we'll be in a better position to handle these various locations. Maybe what they need on top of this building is a satellite
שומעים? אוקיי.
Yes. So I'd like to begin with several sections within the Zohar that is appropriate for achieving this vital connection to the embodiment of Moses. I read from the section in Bereshit on page Resh Lamed 230, the subparagraph 274. Vayiser Hashem Elokim min ha'adama. And this is referring to the creation of man. Creation of man, birds, etc. Says the Zohar, Vay lebnei ha'olam shehem atumei lev v'shtuemei einayim. Woe unto those people whose hearts and their eyes do not perceive. She'inam mistaklim b'sodot ha'Torah ve'inu yodim. For they do not reflect on the secrets of the Torah and do not know that there are many mysteries that were created for only one purpose, and that is to enlighten us. And when it discusses man, animal, what the Torah is implying is not the literal superficial meaning of creation of man, animal, etc., or the birds, but rather the levels of souls that all of mankind possess. And there are several souls. We have learned the lowest, which is referred to as nefesh. Then there is ruach. Then there is neshama. Vafilu elu shezachu lenefesh od lo zachu leruach haya ein lashkina eza behem be'et hagalot. For those who have only achieved the level of nefesh and have not achieved the next level of ruach, meaning nefesh to be understood possibly as crude spirit, and ruach is spirit, the next level. For those who have unfortunately been born and thus far not achieved any higher levels of consciousness, but rather maintain nothing more than the level of consciousness that they entered this world with, then these people, says the Zohar, cannot expect the Shekhinah. And we know that the Shekhinah, briefly stated, is the all-embracing, all-encompassing knowledge of the universe. That is what Shekhinah means. When we pray, when we discuss the Shekhinah, what we're hoping to do is connect with Shekhinah, which means, insofar as time, space, and motion is concerned, they are all in one blessed unity. Meaning, simply stated, that tomorrow, and today, and yesterday are all in reality one. Except because if the individual is in that level of nefesh, then he remains in a fragmented state of consciousness. He sees only what he sees before him. But what he sees before him, says the Zohar, is stumeyayin, einayim. The eyes do not perceive as they should, but rather perceive things in a fragmented way. Well, how can I demonstrate that for most people, what they observe sometimes one way, and looking at the very same idea, seeing it another way. If we were to take notice of the letter Pei on the right upper hand corner, the Pei. If you look closely, you will see the letter Pei, and within the letter Pei, Kabbalistically written, is a bet. The outside of the letter, or let's say the white part of the letter, is the Pei. The internal aspect is the bet. Now, when you see, for most of us, when you observe the bet, you lose consciousness of the existence of the Pei. And if you look at the Pei, you then no longer, if you just concentrate on observing the Pei, suddenly we no longer observe the bet. Is this normal? Although we are told this is an optical illusion, and what does that essentially mean, optical illusion? That our eyes are fragmented. Our eyes deceive. Our eyes have not been raised to the level of Ruach, to that upper level, and therefore, in our lives, whether it be in business, whether it even be concerning something of in the states of health or relationships, two people can observe the same thing, and there are two opposite opinions concerning the very same idea. If there are two opinions, if they are in the level of Ruach, then they are not contradictory, nor are they two different opinions, but rather both are one or different sides of one basic idea, and both will complement each other, but two different perspectives of the same essential idea. It is only, unfortunately, that the whole world is still enmeshed within that framework known as nefesh, where our eyes, our ears, our sense of smell, our minds, and for that reason, we have a particular prayer that deals with moach yamin and moach smol. Even the brain has two compartments. Of course, that's only recent knowledge, but this has been known to the Kabbalists since Avraham Avinu, that there are two sides of the brain. Why are there two sides? Are they there for the purpose of confusing the issue, confusing that which we are to understand? And the answer is no. You need both perspectives, while at times may even seem contradictory, but you need these two perspectives to understand. And with only one perspective, you have a very limited view. And so here the Zohar cautions us that for those of us who have come into this world without a desire to elevate our levels of consciousness, and certainly there is no better tool in the world, than even at its very minimum, the scanning of the Zohar far surpasses any of the other techniques that might be recommended on how one can elevate their states of consciousness. But the reason for elevating one's states of consciousness, why? And that is so that we can ultimately achieve a level of consciousness that despite the understanding of the two brain, the two eyes, and that's why there are two eyes, because both are essential, left and right. Without left and right, no less than in a bulb. They are both essential for the composite of an all-embracing unit. Says the Zohar, unfortunately, the world still remains in that state of nefesh. And therefore, because we remain in that state of nefesh, the Shekhinah, which assists us in embracing all of these different aspects, like yesterday and today, are two different aspects. That does not necessarily mean that they are divided, or that they must sometimes contradict each other, or may have no relationship with each other. All of these aspects only appear to be the reality because we live in the reality that we cannot embrace the pay and the bet as one whole union. And yet we all have to agree that neither did the bet disappear when we observed the pay, nor did the pay disappear when we observed the bet. Even with our strongest egos, we have to admit that somehow in our consciousness, we do not and have not that kind of consciousness that can embrace all of reality at the same time, because we are essentially fragmented. If we can connect to the Shekhinah contains this all-embracing perspective, taking yesterday, tomorrow, as one essential whole. Ein la Shekhinah ezer behem be'et hagalut. What does galut mean? Exile. Some people read it as living outside of Israel. The galut when the Jews were in Egypt. They were in galut. Some interpret galut meaning outside of Israel, and when you live in Israel, then you're no longer in galut. And of course that is not the meaning of galut. Galut means the idea that we are separated from ourselves. We have different confrontations within ourselves. And consequently, the right brain and the left brain cannot live in harmony with those around us. Because if one is not in harmony with oneself, how in the world can we ever expect ourselves to be in harmony with others? And one of the simplest techniques is to take this and many other illustrations where we apply the idea of optical illusion, which doesn't say anything except to remind us possibly that we are in a fragmented state of nefesh. And so if we can be conscious or recognize the idea that as long as we cannot see the bet clearly and the pay clearly at the same time, because both exist, and according to science, what you don't see is not there, well, they'll have some difficulty in explaining how the bet has disappeared. But that is essentially one of the principles of physics, that what you do not observe is not there. And that, unfortunately, is incorrect. Not because two people, one could be focusing on the bet, and one could be focusing on the pay. And therefore, we know that both must be there, because one says, I see the bet, and the other says, I see the pay. Obviously, they're both present. The fact that one does not see cannot make that one letter, one aspect of the letter disappear because another individual says it's not there. V'chein ein eze mehem leMoshe shehu im Ashkinah. And therefore, and maybe this, I think, is the fundamental idea why subconsciously the anniversary of Moses lifting himself off from the observable plane, because Moses, in effect, is not here for those who remain, says the Zohar, in this level of nefesh. And therefore, over the years, not feeling the connection, not seeing an improvement within their lives. And if the purpose, the original purpose of connecting on Zayin Adar with Moses was for the express purpose of reaching the Shekhinah, with whom Moses is connected, and therefore, I guess the Jews came to the conclusion that there is no purpose, there is no sense any further in maintaining this connection with Moses on Zayin Adar. And therefore, over the past thousands of years, what have we seen but a landscape of pain, misery, suffering? And that landscape hasn't changed. It continues to exist as such, fragmented. Everyone seeing their own perspective. Even though we know from the teachings of Kabbalah that if one cannot enter into the perspective, into the heart of the fellow confrontee, then there is no conversation. There is what we call and refer to as an argument. It's not a discussion, because each one remains in their individual perspectives. It is like the bulb. If the positive pole and the negative pole did not mesh with each other, you wouldn't have light. So too is it with two individuals who may have completely opposite opinions. However, being at the level of nefesh, they can only perceive themselves. They cannot comprehend or go into the hearts, the minds of those who are listening as a teacher thinking only of what he has to share. What is he going to say to his students? Without first considering, are those students capable, willing to comprehend what I have to offer, irrespective of how valuable, how important that information is to the student? For only then can you have a circuitry of life. And therefore, since Moses, says the Shebachol Eish Galta Ashkina Lo Zaz Moshe Himena, and since we are in this exile, meaning we have become disconnected from the Shekhinah, and Moses never leaves the Shekhinah, and therefore we have, in a certain measure, lost our contact with Moshe. Amalo Rabbi Shimon, Bini, my son, speaking to his son Rabbi Lazar, V'chilo lamadata katuv, did you not learn the following verse, Magid Bereshit Achrit? Already, this is a verse from Isaiah, where Isaiah quotes a verse connecting with the original creation, and says, when you have Bereshit, the beginning, Don't you know that beginning already includes the end? Why does it say the beginning? At the beginning, which is the way we interpret Bereshit, that's the beginning. Because it is no different than the seed, no different than the sperm, no different than the egg. Therein lies all. Even at our level of physical existence, we pay no attention to the idea, that actually whatever will ever appear has already appeared, maybe only in a potential state, concealed in the seed, in the sperm, in the egg. But nevertheless, it already exists, because if not, where did the tree come from? If not, where did this child come from? Said Rabbi Shimon, when it says Bereshit at the beginning, do not interpret the beginning as only the beginning. Magid Mereshit Achrit. בתחילת הבריאה רמוזים המעשים שבאחרית הימים. דהיינו שבגמר התיקון. Not only today for us, but the end of the correction. Amalei Hachi Hu Vadai. Rabbi Lazar says, of course it is so. Dahaynu shemagid mereshit achrit, dahaynu shehoda la'aviv. Meaning, says the Zohar, that Rabbi Lazar agreed with his father. I was wondering, did Rabbi Shimon need an affirmation? Where his son says, and we know the relationship between Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Shimon. They were truly one soul. Some of us may never understand what that means. Because as long as we do not begin to think outside of ourselves, not more concerned for the other, but also to understand that outside of me, like I'm sure the plus pole says to the minus pole, and the minus pole says to itself, although it's negative, meaning it has this desire to receive for itself, says to itself, I cannot extend further unless I also embrace and include that which is outside of me. And here Rabbi Lazar, whose connection with his father was one of one soul. It's clearly demonstrated even when Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai passed from the observable scene, because we know too that Rabbi Shimon did not die, as it will shortly be quoted from Rabbi Shimon. Moshe Rabbeinu did not die. These people, their presence appear more strongly than they would during the normal course of a year, because they don't come alive on their death anniversary and disappear the following day. But for this day, as we shall learn, there is a reason why we make this contact. Why can't we make it tomorrow or the day before? Why is it so necessary that we make it on this day? But Rabbi Lazar, when he said, and he repeats it, Vadai shemagid nereshit achrit, for surely, as you, my father, have stated, for surely that which exists at the very beginning has already included that which will exist and will someday come to be the very end. Meaning they are both present at the same time. Because while we may hear these words, and while intellectually they may sound right, but there is a difference. Here the Zohar says, Vadai. that he agreed. What did it mean he agreed with his father? It was not just another opinion, but it became, as he was with his father, one embodiment. This idea was never to be forgotten by Rabbi Lazar. Meaning it wasn't enough that he heard the idea and agreed to the idea, but he felt that idea. It became part of his essential being. If information does not become part, if a teacher cannot convey information that becomes part of the essence of that student, he has failed. He has failed, not the student, but he has failed. Because what he, in essence, has been transferring information, not yeda, not Adam yada es chava. He didn't let go. He let go of the information, but he didn't let go. The teacher doesn't let go of his essential being. He does not embrace the student as himself. I don't know if there's a college professor that prepares his consciousness before he enters the classroom. And therefore, the student and teacher ultimately go their separate ways. The reason for that is because they're still, both the teacher and maybe the student, are both in that consciousness level known as nefesh. There, the student is the student and the teacher is the teacher. Whereas when one embraces the other, both embrace each other, as it says here, that Rabbi Lazar became part. It was just not telling his father, you're right, Dad, you're right. That's not what Rabbi Lazar was stating. He was saying, I understand and I feel you within me. It's become part of me. And therefore, Rabbi Lazar would never lose that touch with his father, even after his father disappeared from this world. Just as it was stated that Rabbi Lazar, what Rabbi Lazar said at the time that Rabbi Shimon was passing out from this world. The same as when Moses was passing out of this world, because we know that Rabbi Shimon was an incarnation of Moses himself. And when Rabbi Lazar wept that night, he did not weep for himself, because Rabbi Lazar had already achieved an elevated state of consciousness. He could be with his father all the time. The pay and the bet were now suitably connected with each other. And so Rabbi Lazar wept for all those who no longer would access into Rabbi Shimon, either because they never heard of Rabbi Shimon, either they would never receive the opportunity to know of Rabbi Shimon, or simply stated, they were told never to connect with Rabbi Shimon, because we are not holy enough. For whatever reason, we then remain in a fragmented state of the pay not being observable when the bet was there, and vice versa. Umamshich Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Shimon continued. Valkein Moshe lo met. Moses did not die. Ki hu im Ashkina bigalut. V'hu nikra Adam. V'alav nema begalut achron ula'adam lo matza ezer elo kulam heim kenegdo. Moses is referred to as that Adam that we read superficially in the Torah. And it is on Adam that it says, and he did not find the support that was necessary. There were no longer supports as we read throughout the Torah. What did Moses want from the Jews? He was providing them with every conceivable whim that they demanded, by miracle or otherwise. And yet, the constant bickering and complaining towards Moses, despite all that Moses had done for them. Says the Zohar, why? Because they were kinegdo. It's true. The positive pole stays there independent of the negative pole, as one against the other. But somehow within the essence of a bulb, we understand that they're brought together. Unfortunately, Moses remained with the Jews as the pay for most of us remains with the bet. Not as one embracing letter, one embracing whole of a letter, but two parts of a letter, a bet and a pay. One not appearing while the other was there. This, says the Zohar, that despite the fact that Moses did not die, for he was with the Shekhinah, but when it speaks, the Torah in chapter 2 of Genesis discusses the creation of man. Came from earth, etc., and then Eve. But it's been discussing Moses, and Moses knew that if he did not have the support of the people, and he is discussing Achrit Hayamim, he is discussing what will be at the end of days, and we are very close to the end of days. What will be the condition of the people? Remember, we just got through, or Rabbi Shimon just finished by saying, Magid Bereshit Achrit. From the very beginning, each verse was telling us what would ultimately happen. Yes, it's true, it's discussing Eve at the same time, but the deeper implication of that verse was how will we observe people at the time of the end of days of which we find ourselves? Bickering, confrontation, without making an attempt to move into those who are Ezek Kenegdo, because each and every single person that comes in contact with anyone, and this is what Rabbi Shimon gleaned from that very same verse that most of us think referred to Adam and Eve. Yes, it does. But remember, whatever happened at that very first beginning of man, also we have the end of man. The end of man is, says the Zohar, that it would be kinegdo. Kinegdo meaning against. Against. People are against. People are not for. They are for movements, not for people. They are for animals, not for people. One can find to love an animal far more easier than he can find to love an individual. Why? Because the movements don't talk back. Dogs don't talk back. And so we find the more secure, the more satisfactory way to satisfy that aspect of me. It is only when we are confronted by another individual, says Rabbi Shimon, then suddenly we have our adversary. Dog is not an adversary. You don't take a dog to court. No reason. You don't take a movement to court. You take people to court. People, said Rabbi Shimon, just as that word indicated when the Torah is discussing Adam and Eve, that people would be kinegdo. People would not be enveloped in an all-embracing unity. There was no one there to help him, to take the Shekhinah from the Galut. There was nobody there except the man who was constantly with the Shekhinah, and that was Moses. So while we live in this level of nefesh, this level of confrontation, kinegdo, oppositions, the one solution, not two solutions, not three, the one solution, as we learned concerning creation. The first day it says, Vayhi Boker Yom Echad. It was a singular day. It doesn't say the first day. On the contrary. The second day it says, Vayhi Boker Yom Sheni. Now there were two. Now they became separated. But when opposition is as one, then you only have, as it is written in the Torah, we had light. Light. For those of you who somehow find it difficult to understand, what does it mean now they had light? Well, if you observe a bulb before it's lit, you see the positive pole and you see the negative pole. Once the light is on, you don't see no positive pole and you don't see no negative pole. All you see is light. Because each and every single kinegdo, the right against the left and the left against the right, they're both of two different natures, become unified. And when they are unified, the result is light. And in another section within the same parsha of Bereshit, this is on page 348. That's Zerampin, which is Ruah. Nikra Moshe. It's called Moshe. The concept of Moses. Vahayu Yamav Meya ve'esim Shanim. And how many years did Moses live? Meya ve'esim Shanim. And this is to teach us, says the Zohar, Remes, it hints, Sha'al yado nitno ha-Torah, va'az dahainu beit matan Torah, hishpiyu chayim lebnei adam me'es ha'chayim. It says that Moses lived these 120 years. What does it mean he lived? Says the Zohar, because on Mount Sinai, that a force called life, from the Eitz HaChaim, and brought it down in a vessel. Ve'ila malei chato Yisrael hayatamid kach. And if the Jews had not sinned with the golden calf, continues the Zohar, hayatamid kach dahainu shahayu mekablim hachayim me'etz hachayim v'lo hayu meitim, and they would never have died. V'zeh shekatuv charut al aluchot lahorot shahayu charut mimalach hamavet. They became free, cherut, from the angel of death. Ki eitz hachayim hayan nimshach lemata shemimenu hachayim nitzchim. And that he, Moses, brought this force of Etz HaChaim that we try daily to make our connections with Moses. And how is this Etz HaChaim brought into our environment, our universe? How did it become materialized? Talking about Etz HaChaim, the force of Etz HaChaim. Force, we cannot even conceptually understand force. A rock is a force, but it's not the 1% of the material. There's a force in that rock. A force, a non-observable force. How does force become materialized? How did the Etz HaChaim become materialized? Says the Zohar. Moshe shalamata. The force of Etz HaChaim, the force that does not coexist with chaos, disorder, pain, and suffering. Does not exist. Does not coexist with them. Although there are some teachings that say evil can coexist with good. That is not the Kabbalistic premise. They cannot coexist. Hamuluvash bebasar, dahainu al yedei matan Torah. Because Moses was a physical human being, and because of his level of consciousness, he was in a position to embody, says the Zohar, the complete force of the Etz HaChaim, and therefore, at that moment, all those around him were freed, became disconnected from Malach HaMavet, from the angel of death, from that force called death. As I pointed out on many occasions, the Zohar says in other sections that on a death certificate you will find heart failure, this disease, another disease, died of that and died of this. Says the Zohar, person doesn't die because of that condition. Death is attributed to the force known as death that brings about the material expression of this force called death. But the person does not die of cancer. Person does not die because the heart stopped working. But rather, says the Zohar, the person stops living because the force of death has consumed the individual and becomes manifest in different forms. But the force that takes the life of an individual is Satan, or the Malach HaMavet, the angel of death. And since Moses became Charut Mimalach HaMavet, because he was the embodiment of Etz HaChaim, he was the embodiment of that force that does not coexist with the force of death. And therefore, so when the Zohar says that Moses did not die, why didn't he die? How come he didn't die? Besides, we'll get to another Zohar that asks the question. It says in Deuteronomy, towards the end, and Moses died. We'll explain that. He does explain that. He does explain it. Explains it in such simple terms that all of us can understand. That it is only the result of our fragmentation, the only result of our desire to be and live in a fragmented world. Because if we didn't desire to leave, if the consciousness of ours was not to be there, then we wouldn't be there. So someone said, well, I would prefer living forever. Who doesn't want to live forever? But forever conflicts with fragmentation. So while we may have the desire to and express a feeling of, I want to live forever, but you cannot coexist with fragmentation and live forever at the same time. You cannot have a peg without a bet. You cannot have life unless you have an accompaniment of life. And the only letter that we find to have this combination of this illusion is the pay and the bet. And they both represent what we have just discussed. Magid Bereshit Achrit. The bet represents the beginning of creation. The first letter of the Torah begins with a bet. What is the pay? Pidyon. Pidyon. Meaning redemption. Meaning the ultimate release from exile into Geula, into freedom. If we cannot experience both of them, is indicative that while we all would love to have life forever going on, nevertheless, we don't realize that our consciousness has not changed from the essential idea of fragmentation. And therefore, Moses didn't die because that force of death, that creates the death that we experience and we observe in our world when we attend a funeral. And so we come to the recognition that there is death in the world. They're burying someone. Some of us who have never attended a funeral, some of us who have never observed a dead person. Do we understand that death is something that is ultimate? And the answer is no. That which you do not experience, that which you cannot feel and touch, is something that never becomes part of us. And therefore death, this idea of death, of people disappearing, if we can learn that it's by and within itself is illusionary, no less than the pay must disappear from the bet and vice versa. And therefore, because Moses never left and became attached to the idea of Etz HaChaim, there could be no death. Once we have made this connection, we have made the connection with life. And therefore concludes the Zohar, Moshe lo met ela nesap me'olam la'olam ha'elyon l'zeir anpin. Moses did not die. He only became gathered from one place to another. An illusion. No less than the bet seems to blend into what? As we observe the bet, and now we observe the pay, the bet blends into the pay. Does that mean the bet no longer exists? In the back of our minds, now that we've studied the combination of the bet and the pay, we come to the realization that one blends into the other. and at the same time, the bet remains. Or if the pay blends into the bet, both remain. Both remain. One has not disappeared. It appears so to the eye, but in reality, they just blended as one unified, whole, embracing unit. And Moses is constantly shedding his light to the Lavanah, which is Shia Nukva, which is the world of Nefesh. Ki Hashemesh, for the sun, Aval Pi Shenesach Me'olam Einomet, here in Los Angeles, at 10 of 12. Does anyone observe the sun? Nobody. Does that mean the sun has died? The answer is no. Not only because we know that tomorrow morning at 6:54 or 6:48, whatever the time might be, the sun will again shine, and we're all convinced of that. And how could you be convinced? Now you don't observe the sun. The sun is gone. And yet you're convinced that the sun will shine tomorrow. But that's not the only reason we are convinced that the sun will shine, because we've had experience year after day, week after week, and year after year, that although the sun disappears, it'll come back. Kind of feel it'll be back. But in addition, we know presently at this hour in Los Angeles of 10 minutes to 12, the sun is shining even in Kobe. The sun shines now. That means the fact that we do not see the sun, does it mean it does not exist? Does it also mean that there's no sun shining here now? Says the Zohar, of course. Now here it becomes a little difficult. We are prepared to accept the idea that the sun blends into another area. But the fact that the sun exists now, shining here now in Los Angeles, should be compared to the bet and the pay. When that bet blended into the pay, don't you realize how our minds are so consumed by Satan consciousness that he will prevent us from the idea that the bet, even though it blended into the pay, and all that I observe now is the pay. And I'll say, where is the bet? It does not exist, and yet we know it's there. As I observe the pay, the bet is there. And yet I find it difficult, as I observe this pay, to comprehend that even the bet is there, although I don't see it. Why can't I not stretch it to its edge, but why can't I say that the sun is there? The fact that I don't see it, but it's there. And to recognize, because we live in a confrontation state all day, whether it would be with our cleaners or whether it would be with the man we're going to purchase something, all day there's a confrontation. This confrontation is what the Zohar says was the problem of Moses. And the only reason that Moses becomes non-observable is because he has a kenegdo. Those who are opposed, who live in this frame of reference known as nefesh, they live in the frame of confrontation. Everything around them is different. Everything around them is outside of themselves. For those people, this comprehension that the sun is here now in Los Angeles, it is not even intellectually that far from the way we should be thinking. But we don't focus. We don't take control of our minds, but rather let it flow with the consciousness of nefesh. Ki hashemesh af al pi shenesa me'olam eino met, klomar eino mitvatel. The bet became null, extinct? No. So too did the sun become extinct. Where is the sun? Well, the sun is on the other side of the earth. But what is the sun doing? Because we are in exile, what is the sun doing? Instead of shining directly, what does it do? It shines indirectly to us. How? Shenichnasu me'el halavana. It shines and we receive its light from the moon. So the sun didn't even stop shining, even for those who cannot perceive that the sun is shining in its full bloom now, only because our consciousness is so fragmented that we can't, the mind will not permit an embracing of 2 or 3 different perspectives of the same idea. The mind, meaning that rational consciousness of Satan, doesn't permit to be able to observe that kind of an idea. But the sun, even for those who do not and are not capable of seeing the sun shine now, will admit that the moon that is shedding its light upon us now, is receiving this light from where? From the sun. So that means the sun does reach us. So it reaches us through another vehicle. Unfortunately, through another vehicle. And now I read from this week's parsha that we had just read in Trumah. And for those of you who heard the message on Shabbat, will now maybe more fully understand what the essential idea of the tabernacle, of the ark, what did that all mean? In fact, I didn't see it, but they had a program of the ancient mysteries discussing the ark, whether it's now in Ethiopia, maybe it's in Ireland, maybe it's who knows where. And scholars giving their opinions of whether that's the ark, it's not the ark, and so on. And we learned from the Zohar that the Zohar cries out, hoping there will be raiders of the lost ark. The trouble is that there are no raiders because nobody knows where the ark is, and yet it's right in front of their very eyes. What? You mean I see the ark? Someone in London sees the ark? Someone in Tokyo sees the ark? We all see the ark? All at the same time? And the answer is yes. How is that possible? Because there are no raiders of the ark. That's why we don't see it. The ark is right in front of us, right now. What is the ark? What is the ark? Do you remember what was placed in the ark? The luchot, the scroll. And as we just quoted the Zohar, what was the significance of that scroll? The hand of God. God wrote it. Now, maybe we have finer scribes than Moses, than God. Was that the significance? That he was a good scribe? Calligraphy was his profession? But we have learned that the Zohar translates charut ala luchot Meaning that within this physical expression, known as the scroll, the Etz HaChaim, that all-embracing unified whole, that once absorbed by man, creates this connection with the Etz HaChaim, and therefore, the clutches that hold, the Satan fragmented consciousness holds over us, becomes released. We become free. For what is freedom? What is freedom? We speak of freedom. We fight for freedom. What is freedom? Freedom in one word means joy. Some people will say freedom from want, freedom from ill health, freedom from this catastrophe, freedom from this malady. But we can add it all up into one word. Joy. If you are content and happy, then you don't have to specify, enumerate that which you want to be free from. I just want to have joy. Those luchot contain the force that nullified death, every form of chaos. The ark contained the remnants, a little of what was left over, the residue of the force of Etz HaChaim. By the same token that this Etz HaChaim was embodied with, as the Zohar said, within Moses, so too did it reach down into the level of stone. Of stone, not only within Moses, but within stone. What does it mean within stone? Meaning within the material world as we know it. The ark, this ark, any ark that is understood, including this one right here, that when we read from the Torah and we know what we want to draw from the Torah, we're not just fulfilling some precept, outdated precept, that very few people care to have any association with or connection with. The reading of the Torah on Shabbat or on Monday and Thursday. But that when we read in the Torah, so we learn in Kabbalah, so we learn in the centers, that what we have done is again made the reappearance of the light, of the Etz HaChaim, come to life in our existence, in our world. And then what do we do with it? We take this Etz HaChaim and we restore it and we return it. Whereas the Torah in the ark represents the potential. But as long as we do not read from it, we have not aroused, we have not brought to its fruition and life the light that it potentially contains. Now this light is restored in this ark. You want to know where the ark is? The ark is wherever the Etz HaChaim is present. Oh, but it's here, it's there. Because we are so fragmented, the idea that the ark in London, and the ark in Paris, the ark in Tel Aviv, and the ark in Jerusalem, or Haifa, or Ashkelon, or wherever around the world, there is an ark that contains the force of the tree of life, that they are not separated. What do you mean they're not separated? Well, that subject, it would be far too difficult for me to encompass within this short period of time. But we have come to some realization that time, space, and motion. Time, space, and motion may be an illusion. Meaning that the ark here and the ark in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem are one. Well, we'll have to learn that quickly. Because as long as we understand that they are two, we will have been separated. We will have been separated from the force of the tree of life, even in this ark. Even in this ark. Because this one singular purpose, as I have noted time and time again, this year will bring about one change. One change. And there will be prices for that change. But one change. There will be a change, forcibly or otherwise, of a change of consciousness in people. We will, out of necessity, out of desire, we will elevate from that nefesh consciousness to understanding that what science has been seeking now since 1927 and have not yet found it is the all-embracing whole, what they call gut, grand unified theory, and they will never find it. They will never find it because they haven't studied Kabbalah. They will never study it. They will never find it because they are not conducting, or they are not studying a methodology by which they can become unified. And as long as they are fragmented, every idea that they can conceive of will be in a fragmented frame of reference. We understand already the grand unified theory. That is the light force of God. When you feel that, then you know you're all around the world. You know you're in control. You know that nobody can touch you. As the Zohar stated. I'm not a charlatan, stay making these kind of statements. I want you to know it says so in the Zohar. In fact, we've been promised those who keep the Torah will never know of suffering. Well, that never came true yet. You ask those poor individuals who lived in the concentration camps, who were observant Jews, who kept the mitzvot, ask them about how the Torah is our protection. The light, and only the light, that emerges from that study called the Torah, or from that instrument called the Torah, or from that instrument referred to as the scroll, does not by and within itself protect us. It is removing from its potential state into a state of actuality where this light becomes materialized in a sense. It becomes from potential into actual. That and only that is what can protect us. But it requires an elevation from nefesh to ruach. Because only then, the fact that we understand that it requires, and if we all understand that, then we have made our connection with Moses. Because what is Moses? What do we want this evening? Why have we come together? Just to pay homage to a great individual? A man who gave the Torah to the world? Is that why we have assembled? And the answer is, of course not. We've come because we came for something. Not to celebrate, not to remember, not a commemoration. We came here for a purpose. And it is the only reason why we ever walk into these premises or any of the premises around the world. We have come to enhance our lives. No other reason. And as Rabbi Shimon constantly repeats in the Zohar, and make no mistake of that, don't listen to me. But Rabbi Shimon says the proof has to be in the pudding. It is not enough that I stand here and tell you the words of Rabbi Shimon and how he tells us that we are guaranteed that if we connect to the tree of life, if we connect, but there is a requirement. You leave go of the fragmentation. And our egos is one heck of a pull on our lives that separates us from our neighbor, from the kenegdo, those who stand before us, those who stand near us. But Rabbi Shimon says that for one who makes that connection to the tree of life, and tonight, because it is Moses' day of leaving. That's why we have him with us. The paradox of life, but we'll now explain that from the Zohar. Paradox. By his leaving this day, we therefore can make a connection to him. Paradox. But we've understood paradoxes before. We understand, before you can breathe in, you've got to breathe out, etc. Many paradoxes that to us are not contradictions, but rather two perspectives of the same idea. I read now from this Parsha Trumah, providing us with an understanding as to what this was about Moses, and connecting it with Parsha Trumah, which deals with the ark and the tabernacle, that we explain to some extent on Shabbat. Lamadnu mi yochol likalel hasik ma sheganuz b'mamvo hazeh shehu yesod. Who can consider themselves included, and that can grasp what is hidden in the level of Zer Anpin or Yesod? Who can grasp the world, the non-observable world? Moses, present here this evening, and everywhere else where he has been requested to make his appearance. Unfortunately, there aren't enough places that tonight can request Moses be part of what of our occasion, of our event over here. Be part. Who can consider themselves as one close to that all-embracing whole? Sharei Moshe lo gila ze b'yamav. This idea that we have been discussing all evening, Moses did not reveal that throughout his life. Kishegila sodot amukim liYisrael. But when he began to reveal those secrets, the secrets that we have been blessed to discuss today, in the 20th century, meaning science also discusses these very same concepts, discussing even immortality that has not been discussed, only in the way of prayer, that Jews for centuries pray in the synagogue that one day God will create immortality. But what it means, people will live forever. How will it come about? Miracle of God. But what Moses did was he revealed the secrets on how one will bring about the idea of immortality, because immortality consists of the participation of all. That's what Moses didn't have at the time of Mount Sinai. The Jews were kenegdo, as we read in the Torah, constantly fighting with Moses, constantly unhappy about their predicament that he took them out from Egypt. Kishegila sodot amukim li Yisrael, v'af al pi shehakol haya mitgale al yado, ela ba'oto sha'ah. Only when did these concepts that we speak of now, when did they become revealed? באותו שעה שרצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לעלותו לישיבה הקדושה העליונה. They only became revealed that day, when he was 120 years old. That you remember I mentioned about the Zohar, the significance of that day. What was the significance of that day? Meaning, this day, every year, that day he revealed those secrets that he had never revealed before. And what did those secrets also reveal? Ulahastiro mibnei adam. Was it some kind of a Houdini act? But it taught all the Jews at that time that when Moses suddenly disappeared, he disappeared from their eyes. Did he literally die? Did he literally become extinct? The answer is no. No. He only became concealed from the eyes of the Jews who lived in a fragmented state of consciousness. He became concealed as if suddenly a curtain was placed between Moses and the rest of the Jews. And to them, Moses was no longer there. Does it mean whatever happened on the other side of the curtain took place? Well, for those who no longer see Moses in front of their eyes, Moses is gone. But Moses is gone not because Moses is gone, but like we say, the earth for Los Angeles now conceals the sun from us. Does that mean the sun has died, said the Zohar? No. The same thing happened. This concept that as long as you are fragmented, the bet disappears into the pay, or the pay disappears into the bet. Does that mean they have died? And the answer is an obvious no, because both remain, because we can move and blend from one situation, from the bet into the pay, and the pay into the bet. Shekatuv ben Meya. We have 5 minutes. Shekatuv ben Meya ve'esim shana anochi hayom. I am today 120 years old. Hayom mamash, says the Zohar, biyom petirato, the day that he passed away. Ki biyom ahu nishlamu yamav lekarev lemakom zeh l'sharanun. For only in that day, not before, but in that day, Moses could disappear and not die. Disappear and not die. Only in that day, because in that day, this day, the day that we are now gathered together, is the day that a consciousness of understanding that what we believe to be insurmountable, what we believe to be the impossible, what we have been programmed into understanding as not existing, today all of those illusions can disappear before our very eyes. And we can see, if we all unfortunately can achieve that level of consciousness of going from nefesh to the ruach. And the Zohar clearly stated how we shall ever achieve that is when there is no more kenegdo, when there is no you and me, but we. Then, and that secret is what was revealed, that what the Jews had been accustomed to seeing people die was only but an illusion. Death itself, for one as Moses, or for those who would now learn on this night of Moses' disappearing from the sight of the Jews, was that it was an event that each and every single one of us can also experience. And the reason that we have gotten together tonight, not last night, and not another night, is because the secret of how we shall never disappear again will have been revealed. Amen. Take it now.